Hi, so this is Celia. This is my response to the activity, and as I was thinking about the various ideas that we went through today in class, which I enjoyed very much, by the way, I found I had all sorts of things that were coming to mind and different metaphors and ways of representing what I was taking in. But so I've kind of combined quite a bit of this into what looks like probably quite a simple representation of the particularly focusing on the discussion between generative AI and agentic AI. So the first thing that struck me was the cycle that was mentioned, that agentive AI is based on the cycle of think, act and observe, and that struck me as basically the Kolb cycle, which I've all my time in higher education has acted as quite a sort of central point of for me when I've been talking to professors about teaching and thinking about how people learn and making the connection between teaching and research, because this idea of you can start anywhere in the cycle, but if you observe something you might think about it and then based on that you act, and that can be represented in formulating a research question, observing the environment, coming up with a theory, trying it out in the form of the act, and then observing what's happened and then carrying on. So that really spoke to me quite loudly. And then in the context of thinking that is how agentic AI is distinguished from generative AI, it moved me to then start thinking about, well, if we're also making a contrast between rational thinking and human thinking, it occurred to me that we could see this in terms of how we've structured society way before AI came into being. So then I was thinking, well, perhaps we could use the metaphor of the factory when we're thinking about generative AI. So that's over on the left there. That's my idea of a factory. So generative AI is backwards looking in the sense that it's based on something that already exists. So you have a data set that's already there, and based on that and based on patterns that emerge from that data set, the generative AI produces something that's new, but it's a new version of something that's gone before. So I've represented that sort of orangey blue bit there is supposed to be my idea of a production line, and the orange is the product. But in this case, the product, they're different orange, they're all orange boxes, or they're boxes containing something within them. Each one is different, but they're similar in that they're based on what's gone before. So they're based on existing ideas. And also, I got there through thinking about generative AI as taking things in a step-by-step fashion. So I was thinking, okay, well, that's a bit like the difference between an operative and a manager, or a designer. The person that's carrying out the instructions in, say, the Amazon warehouse is following from a generative AI approach, in that they've got a set series of things to do. They're not being asked to think creatively and come up with something new. By contrast, if we look over on the right-hand side, the red building, that's my representation of a university, and I'm thinking of this in terms of agentic AI, which rather than producing the items that are based on existing ideas, the product of the agentic AI is forward-looking. It's still based on what's gone before, but it's creating new ideas. And rather than being expected to follow instructions step by step, it's able to problem solve. I mean, there's all sorts of problems I could see with it. It's worried me a lot that we could be handing over control of our environment and the consequences of actions to a computer and taking it away from humans. But I think we'll probably park that just for the second. And the way I've represented it here, I would say in my mind, university is a positive thing. So perhaps I've made it overly optimistic. But just from that perspective, that if the university churns out lots of students, and they all look the same in terms of they're wearing their graduation garb, with their mortarboard and their black cloaks and so on, but each of those individuals is not a product that's the same as each other. Each of those is able to use what they've learned in terms of knowledge, but also their skills and their abilities to create new things and solve problems in the future. So that's where my thinking was going, and I have to say it was quite therapeutic, if that's the right word, but to try to represent this. I mean, I couldn't resist using words, as you can see. I couldn't get away from that, but I did at least manage to use several of my coloured pencils, and it did help me to clarify my ideas. Anyway, I'm looking forward to next week. Thank you.